Evan wasn't supposed to be tearing down the wall. The narrow attic bedroom in his grandmother's house had been shut for years, the door locked after she moved into a care home. But after the funeral, the house fell to him. Cleaning it out had been more tedious than sentimental. Years of dust, boxes of brittle newspapers, furniture draped in yellowing sheets. That morning, he noticed a faint discoloration on one corner of the bedroom wall, where the plaster seemed to bow inward just slightly. His curiosity outweighed his plan to leave structural stuff for later. He grabbed a screwdriver from the toolbox and began chipping away. The plaster crumbled more easily than it should have, revealing not the wooden beam he expected, but a hollow cavity. Something was wedged inside, wrapped in what looked like an old dish towel. He pulled it out and unwrapped the fabric. A VHS tape. It was unmarked, the plastic housing dulled with age, faint scuff marks along the edge where it had rubbed against something for years. No label, no handwriting. Evan sat back on his heels, staring at it. The logical part of his brain knew it was probably nothing. Maybe some old home movie his grandmother didn't care about. But the way it had been hidden, deliberately sealed away in the wall, made his skin prickle. In the quiet of the attic, he became acutely aware of every sound. The tick of the old clock downstairs, the faint hum of wind outside, the settling creaks of the house. He went to the living room, where an old VCR still sat hooked to the corner television. The thing was dusty but functional. Sliding the tape in felt strangely ceremonial. The machine whirred, and the TV screen filled with static before flickering to life. The image was grainy, but it was clearly his grandmother's living room, the same one he was sitting in now, only emptier. The furniture was arranged differently, and the lighting suggested late afternoon. The camera angle was strange, high up in the corner, as if mounted to the wall. Nothing happened for the first minute. Then a figure entered the frame. It was a man, maybe in his 30s, wearing a dark sweater. Evan didn't recognize him. The man didn't seem to notice the camera. He crossed the room, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall for several minutes without moving. Then, abruptly, he turned his head toward the camera. The motion was slow, deliberate. His face was hard to make out in the static, but Evan thought he could see the faint shape of a smile. The tape cut to black. Evan leaned back, unsettled. There was no ending, no credits, no sign it was over, just darkness. He ejected the tape and examined it again. Still no markings. He told himself it was just some old security footage. Maybe his grandfather had experimented with cameras decades ago. But that didn't explain the smile, or why it had been hidden in a wall. That night, Evan set the tape on the coffee table and tried to ignore it. He ordered takeout, unpacked a few boxes, and told himself tomorrow he'd start organizing things for sale. Around 11 p.m., as he was getting ready for bed, he noticed something odd. The VCR was on. He was sure he'd turned it off earlier. The power light glowed faintly red, and the tape was no longer on the coffee table. It was back in the machine. Evan stood there for a long moment, trying to convince himself he'd absent-mindedly put it away. But his hands had been nowhere near it since that afternoon. Against his better judgment, he pressed play. The same grainy image appeared, the living room from the corner angle. Only now, it looked exactly as it did tonight. Same furniture arrangement, same lighting. The couch was empty. Then Evan walked into frame. He froze. The figure on the tape was unmistakably him. Same hoodie, same jeans. He watched as his recorded self sat down on the couch, staring forward. The image jittered slightly, static crawling across the edges. After a long, silent minute, his on-screen self turned toward the camera and smiled. Evan sat there, the static hum of the TV filling the silence. The version of himself on screen didn't break eye contact with the camera. He didn't look quite right. There was something off about the posture, the way the shoulders hunched slightly forward, like the frame was too tight around the body. Then, without warning, the Evan in the video stood up. He walked out of frame. The tape didn't cut to black this time. It kept rolling, showing the empty couch and the dim light from the hallway. A shadow passed along the wall, not shaped like his own. Tall, narrow, moving slowly toward where the camera must have been mounted. The picture dissolved into static. The VCR clicked, the tape automatically rewinding itself. Evan's skin prickled. He ejected it, set it down, and left the TV off. He told himself it was just an old tape that had degraded in storage, maybe some bizarre coincidence of home footage. But even as he walked to the kitchen for a glass of water, he kept glancing at the dark TV screen, half expecting to see movement in its reflection. By midnight, he decided to just go to bed. He was almost asleep when a faint sound pulled him back to full awareness, the soft, mechanical whir of the VCR from the living room. He got up and padded down the hall. The living room was dark except for the glow of the TV. The tape was playing on its own. Evan's stomach tightened as he saw the image. The couch again, exactly as it was now. But this time, he wasn't on screen. It was empty for a long moment. Then, from the far edge of the frame, a figure stepped into view. It was him, again, but dressed differently, in a shirt he hadn't worn in years. His hair was slightly shorter. The details were small, but enough to make it feel out of order. The version of him on screen sat down, rested his elbows on his knees, and stared at the carpet. Then he looked directly at the camera. The smile came slowly, unnaturally. Evan felt his breath shorten. Something about seeing his own face, but not now's face, smiling in that wrong way, made his skin crawl. And then the tape flickered. For a single frame, the figure wasn't him at all. It was someone else. Same posture, same clothes, but a face he didn't recognize. Pale, eyes too wide, lips pressed together like they were holding a laugh. The frame blinked back to his own image instantly. Evan yanked the tape from the VCR, the TV cutting to black. He put it on the far side of the room, as if distance could make it less present. He stayed awake on the couch until dawn, the sound of the wind against the windows making him flinch every time it shifted. By morning, the tape was gone. By the time Evan woke that afternoon, the house was quiet. Too quiet. He walked through each room, scanning the shelves, the tables, the corners. No tape. No sign it had ever been in the room. He checked the VCR, just in case. Empty. Trying to shake off the creeping sense of intrusion, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "You'll want to see this." No link. No image. Just a message. He typed back, "Who is this?" and waited. No response. An hour later, while unpacking a box of old books, he noticed the TV was on again. The VCR's tray was shut. Slowly, Evan crossed the living room. The tape was inside, playing. He was sure it hadn't been there a moment ago. On the screen, the living room, same angle as always. The couch was empty. The clock on the wall read 3:42 p.m., exactly 2 minutes from now. He sat frozen, watching the timestamp inch toward the present. At 3:42 sharp, the version of him on screen entered the room. It was exactly what he was doing now. Same shirt, same mug of coffee in hand, same slight frown. He watched himself sit down on the couch and take a sip. Then the on-screen, Evan looked up toward the camera, as if hearing something. Evan glanced toward the corner where the camera must have been. Nothing there. When he looked back at the screen, the Evan in the video was pointing at him. Not toward the couch, not toward the room, directly at the real Evan watching. He felt his pulse in his fingertips. The version on screen leaned forward, mouth moving. No audio, just the shape of the words. Evan leaned closer, tried to read his own lips. It looked like, "It's here now." A shadow stretched across the edge of the frame. Not his, not matching any movement in the room. Static swallowed the image. The tape rewound itself automatically. Evan's mug shook slightly in his hand. He ejected the tape and shoved it into a drawer. That night, he dreamed of the living room camera, except the image was reversed, showing his face pressed against the lens from the other side. When he woke, the tape was back in the VCR. Evan stood in the doorway, staring at the VCR. The tape was back where it shouldn't be, the red play, light glowing faintly in the dim morning light. He didn't want to touch it, didn't want to hear the mechanical click as it accepted the tape into its gears. But his hand moved anyway, as if pulled by the weight of habit. The screen came alive. For the first time, it wasn't the living room. It was his bedroom. His actual bedroom. The unmade bed, the pile of laundry by the chair, the slant of sunlight coming through the blinds. There was no camera in there. He had never installed one. The image was grainy, black and white. The angle was from the far corner, near the ceiling, like the eye of something that had been watching for a long time. On the bed, he was sleeping. Evan's breath slowed involuntarily, syncing with the steady rise and fall of the chest on screen. Then the figure shifted in the bed, rolled over. The version of him in the video opened his eyes. Not in that groggy, half-aware way people wake up, but wide, alert, as if he had been awake all along. The on-screen, Evan sat up slowly, head turning toward the corner where the invisible camera must have been. He smiled. It was the same wrong smile from every other recording. The figure swung his legs off the bed, stood, and walked out of frame toward the door. Evan glanced instinctively toward his real bedroom door. It was shut. When he looked back at the TV, the screen showed the bedroom empty, until a shadow crossed it. It was tall, narrow, and lingered in the doorway. Then it stepped inside. The static erupted suddenly, filling the screen. Evan ejected the tape and set it on the table. He paced the living room, his mind flipping through possibilities. Hidden camera, old prank, hallucination. But there was no denying what he had just seen. It was his room, now, and something else had been in it. That night, he tried to sleep in the guest room. He locked the door, left the hall light on, and pushed a chair against the knob. Somewhere around 3 a.m., he woke to the faint, mechanical whir of the VCR. From down the hall, Evan didn't move at first. Lying there in the dim guest room, he told himself it was just the refrigerator cycling on or the wind against the siding. But the sound came again, soft, steady, mechanical. The unmistakable whir of tape spools turning. He sat up, heart hammering, eyes on the sliver of hallway visible under the door. The glow came next, faint, bluish, pulsing in time with static. He climbed out of bed and approached the door, careful not to make the chair scrape against the floor. He eased it aside, turned the lock, and opened the door a fraction. From the far end of the hall, the living room TV was on. The pale light painted the walls in erratic flashes. The VCR was playing. He stepped into the hall, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The closer he got, the more certain he became that something was different this time. The image on the screen wasn't a recording. It was now. The camera, wherever it was showing him in the hallway, moving toward the TV. The angle was wrong, though. It was higher than eye level, tilted slightly down, like something taller than him was holding it. He stopped halfway to the living room. On the screen, his image stopped too. He lifted a hand slowly. The Evan on the screen lifted his hand at the exact same moment. But as his own arm began to lower, the figure on the tape kept holding his up, fingers spreading wider than they should, stretching unnaturally before curling into a slow wave. Evan's breath caught in his throat. Then, without warning, the version on screen turned away from the camera, not toward the living room like Evan was standing in, but toward something behind the perspective of the lens. It looked up. Evan heard it then, the faintest creak of a floorboard directly above him. His gaze shot to the ceiling. The TV cut to static. He yanked the tape from the VCR, the whirring stopping abruptly. The cassette felt warmer than it should in his hands, as if it had been running for hours. He wanted to throw it out, smash it, burn it, but some deeper instinct kept him from doing it. It felt like destroying it might make something worse. He set it face down on the floor, backed away, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, the tape was gone again. Evan tried to keep busy the next day. He left the house for hours, wandered aimlessly through hardware stores, sat in a coffee shop nursing a drink he barely touched, walked aimlessly through crowded streets. Every time he stepped outside, he told himself he wouldn't go back. But by late evening, he was unlocking the front door again, the stale air of the house wrapping around him like it had been waiting. The living room was quiet. The VCR was empty. He double-checked every drawer, every shelf, every place the tape might be. Nothing. By midnight, he almost believed it was over. Then came a knock. 3 soft taps at the front door. Evan froze. The porch light was off. The peephole showed only darkness. He didn't open it. Instead, he stepped back. That's when he noticed it. The faint glow from the living room. The TV was on again, and the tape was playing. On screen, the camera showed his front door, from inside the house. The angle was just over his shoulder, looking toward the same dark doorway he had just stepped away from. The timestamp matched the current time exactly. Evan turned toward the TV, glancing between the screen and the real front door. On the tape, his on-screen self walked forward. His real body remained rooted in place. The version in the recording unlocked the door. A shape entered. It was impossible to describe, not in the way of forgetting details, but in the way that the details wouldn't stay still. Its outline shifted, stretching in one moment, collapsing in the next. It seemed tall and thin until it moved, and then it wasn't thin at all. Evan's stomach twisted. The thing stepped past the threshold, and the camera angle panned slightly, as though it were now holding the lens itself. The figure on screen, his own double, looked straight at the camera. "You're going to keep watching," it said. The words were clear, even though he hadn't connected any speakers to the VCR. Then the screen flickered. For a heartbeat, Evan saw the image of his bedroom again. He was lying in bed, asleep. The date in the corner read tomorrow's date. The tape clicked off. When the screen went dark, the room stayed silent. No movement outside the window. No hum from the VCR. The cassette was gone. Evan sat there until the first hint of daylight crept through the blinds. He told himself he'd leave the house that morning and never return. But when the sun rose fully, he was still sitting in the same spot, watching the empty space where the tape had been. Somewhere in the walls, faint and muffled, he could hear the slow, steady whir of something recording.